Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Michelle Aubin and Linda Lang.
Hi, I'm Michelle Aubin, and I'm a wellness coach who helps people get in touch with their inner healer.
And I'm Linda Lang, an emotional alchemist and intuitive healer. Hi, Michelle. How are you this week?
I'm great this week, Linda. How are you?
I'm really good. I've had a really interesting experience that I thought we could talk about, would make a great topic. It's something that's happened to me many, many times, but it happened to me really recently as I picked up a book and started to read it. You know, I've been an avid reader throughout my spiritual life, back in the 80s with, Neil Donald Walsh and Dan Millman and, all these kind of very famous writers. And having read many of their books, I was really happy to read them and felt very aligned with many of the things that I read. And on occasion, over the last couple of years, I'll pick up a book that is a little bit different. I can feel it actually working on my energy system as I read.
You feel the book working on your energy system?
Well, I feel the words that I'm reading kind of shifting things in my energy system and in my unconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
And quite often they're channeled books, say the Paul Selig books or even the old Seth books. I can feel. And it's really strange because it's almost like there's a cloud that kind of comes over you and you can feel things kind of shifting. And I become very tired. I can only read a few pages at a time. And those books actually tell you that they're working on you.
They do. They talk about, a lot of times I've read about encoded messages or multi-layered messages, and I never really understood it until I became aware of it on myself.
My conscious mind gets a little foggy, and I can feel my unconscious mind kind of chugging underneath, kind of processing. And I find it really interesting, actually. And
do you think you go into a trance state? Because
maybe.
What you're saying is that the conscious logical mind it's not speaking necessarily to that part of your mind?
Yeah, and I mean, I maybe read a paragraph and I'll get to the end of the paragraph and I'll be like, what did I just read? I mean, it's like I have no conscious recollection, and I'll go back and I'll read it, and I'm like, I remember reading that, and I'm foggy again. It's like it's like my system is interpreting a new methodology or a new awareness through the words that I'm reading. And I think it's actually fascinating, and one of the reasons why I liked reading channel books. Not every channel book does that for me, but there are definitely channel books that do shift things in my consciousness. And then I can see differences within myself over, the period of days after having read. It's really interesting. I think that you can read a book and have shifts through reading. And yet, on another level, anything we read, anything we see or watch on TV also gets kind of put into our data bank of information and can make an impact. But this is a different level of impact that I'm talking about. So I hope I'm being clear.
Yes, I mean, language is a form of magic in a way, which is what you're speaking to as well about this idea of programming. Like any kind of media we take in on a level of programming our beliefs and thought patterns with the words themselves is happening all the time.
Yeah.
On another level, there's a way that words can be arranged to have multiple meanings that can induce a trance state. I've had that happen when I've read certain books that are designed to do that, like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and that kind of thing. So language itself can be manipulated to change our brain state. And then you're talking about even another level, which is reading it and then a vibrational change is happening. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And what I found really interesting, like I say, usually it's a channel book that does that for me. But in my Facebook group, I picked up a book to do a bibliomancy. We've talked about that before, about opening a book and picking out a passage from that book to have a message. And I picked up a Deepak Chopra book, which doesn't usually do that for me. And I picked this book, the Book of Secrets, and picked a passage in it and immediately had that kind of altered dimension kind of reality. And I thought, whoa, Deepak Chopra, really? Okay. So
and you felt like taking a little nap. And this is not a channeled book.
This is not, well, not channeled in the way that we consider channeled, like not speaking to guides or masters or ascended beings, that's for sure. So I thought it was really interesting. And then I decided to actually start reading the book. It's a book I've had for some time and I haven't read it. And it really does talk about becoming the master in your universe. And I thought it was so interesting because the very next day after starting to read it, I had contact from my Huna group and a new project that we're embarking as a school where we're going to go through the Huna assumptions, which are essentially the Huna universal laws. And isn't the first one exactly what Deepak Chopra was talking about, as above, so below, and how the universe is, you are in the universe and the universe is inside of you, and how all the energy correlates. So I just thought it was very synchronistic. And so, I'm prepared to get quite buzzed out with Deepak Chopra. Yeah.
That's really funny. So in a way, it's like the concept that you're working with is coming to you through multiple channels at the same time. The concept of working with that level of being the master of your world and what that means is coming at you.
One thing that I've been reading that I really appreciate, because Deepak Chopra is an MD and he does kind of look at things very spiritually but also scientifically from that perspective. And he talks about how our whole life experience really is inside of us. And that's simply because everything we see and everything we experience is an interpretation within ourselves from our own mind, depending on our past experiences and our past beliefs and any emotional baggage we have, our outlook in life. And that from that perspective, we are projecting that onto what we see so that it really is within us. And I thought that was a really interesting way of explaining that, because that really is a wisdom that's passed down through many ancient mystical teachings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also connected to some modern day people like Wayne Dyer had the phrase, when you believe it, you will see it, which can be hard to wrap your head around when you're coming from the mainstream ideas of how reality works. First A happens, then B happens, and reality just exists outside of me, and I'm perceiving the table or this event happen, and it just is. But what he's saying is, if you believe something, you will see evidence for that belief.
I do think it is very interesting, and it really reminds me of the Matrix, being kind of plugging in and having the whole life experience really within a person's mind.
This is a topic endlessly interesting, and it relates to modern physics. The idea that the observer determines, or even the presence of an observer affects the outcome of an experiment. And this is becoming at least the things I read online, discussed more and more and what the implications of that are. And I recently came across something that talked about the placebo effect is changing. And
Oh, that's interesting.
it is. And I don't have a link. I'll dig up the link and put it below in the notes, because it's really intriguing to think that the placebo effect, which was, I don't know if it was somewhere in the 30s, like effectiveness of believing that a sugar pill is going to help you with your headache 30 to 40% of the time, roughly. It's increasing scientifically, the frequency of it, which maybe I am creating that evidence because I am believing more and more of all of us having this ability to heal and tapping into that. So how does my belief cause me to come across an article that talks about this, but also, is there more of this being discussed in the culture? I think a lot of people are frustrated with mainstream medicine, and they're looking for solutions and exploring this in a bigger way, and maybe that's collectively contributing to this idea of tapping into this healing ability that we all have.
And maybe you're the butterfly that's flapping its wings and creating the ripple that goes through the whole world to create change.
Maybe, and maybe there's thousands of butterflies.
And it's a good remembrance as well to know that the messages can come from unexpected places. Like, I would never in a million years would have thought a Deepak Chopra book would have done this for me. Right. And lo and behold, when you're open to receiving, it can come from any place, really, right?
Do you ever get that from internet websites that you visit?
I can't think of one offhand.
Like, you've never been online and looked at something and, oh, I need to take a nap now? I have.
No. Yeah, no, actually.
I need to process this, and I take a little nap.
It's perfect. I mean, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a way that you really absorb a lot of information.
I do. I mean, I think I love books. I love physical books, but sources of information come in all kinds of ways. So I get a lot of interesting ideas from interesting people.
And there's plenty of interesting ideas out there, that's for sure.
Well, speaking of creating this, creating our experiences, when I use the internet, I always have an intention that I will be drawn to information and websites that will help me find and stay on my highest trajectory. Because there's so much out there, and we can, all of us get distracted and triggered. And so when I started doing that with the internet, my experience really shifted. And
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
What a great example of being sovereign with your time and still being open.
Yeah.
Putting your intention out there.
Yeah. And I like to remind everyone that we can use these tools and not let them use us. Because if we use them without being focused, then we're at the whim. But I try to say, well, I'm going to use this tool for the best purposes in my life, which is all about evolution, expansion, growth. And when I do that, there's so much available to us these days online. I was just telling you before we hit record about Udemy and all the things I found on Udemy about meditation and personal growth. I mean, it's just an amazing time we live in. So
it is an amazing time, and also a time where we have to learn discernment for those very same reasons that we can just fill our time with exploring and doing and not actually experiencing.
It can be very tricky.
Yeah, a fine line.
So you talked about books. We ended up talking about the internet, and I want to kind of wrap this up by sharing my experience with a book. And I brought it. It's the I Ching.
Fantastic.
Talking about books that affect us on energetic levels and intellectual, but more than intellectual levels. And like this book I came across in 1986. I was in a New Age bookstore, and it literally fell on my head from a top shelf. And I had no idea what it was. I was young, interested in things, but never heard of this. But I opened it, and it's all these Chinese characters and explanations, and I was overwhelmed. But I was like, okay, this book fell on my head, so I was intrigued, but I was like, I should get it because it felt like something's
going on.
going on. And it sat on my shelf unread for a couple of years. I just maybe wasn't ready to look at it, and maybe I was intimidated by the size. But when I finally did, I had a night job. I was working overnights, and I had a lot of time to read. So I would bring my book, and I'll tell you, it's like having a conversation. It's like I would do the coins. You throw your coins, you get some lines, and you read the matching hexagram. And I felt like it was a person. And have you ever used the I Ching?
No, I think that's really fascinating. I mean, I know a little bit about it, but mostly because of its association with the human design. But I think that is, so it's almost like oracle or tarot that you can get messages from. Oh, that's really cool.
It's an oracle, but it's so much more than, it doesn't tell you what to do. So this is an ancient book. It's like, it goes back at least 3,000 years, but maybe longer. And there were emperors who commented on each hexagram. So let me back up and say each hexagram has a meaning. You read the meaning. And it's very poetic, and it's written in metaphors a lot of times. So there are 64, I believe. I don't know if it's 64 hexagrams. And it's supposed to encompass every area of life, different stages of life, different people. And when you read the meaning, sometimes my experience is sometimes it jumps out at me. It's very clear, like, oh my God, this speaks perfectly to my situation. And other times I have to dig a little deeper. But it can be very practical, things like talking about the law, things like talking about conflicts. And then other times it can be, the advice can feel a little more like more emotional guidance. And then there are the commentaries. So there's more material to read. I don't use it all the time, but when I do, it always feels like there's a depth of wisdom and layers of wisdom if I want to use it for a quick thing, or if I want to kind of really look at a situation a little deeper. And the thing about this book, in addition to everything I've just said, there are times when I have tossed the coins, I've done the reading, I don't necessarily understand it, or I don't like the reading. This is when I was younger, right? And I was maybe not liking the truth of whatever the situation was. I would do it again, wanting a different answer, and the same hexagram would come up. And the chances of that happening are minuscule. And that's when I feel like, oh my gosh, like there's something happening here. And there were other times when I would try to get a different answer, and it would have comments that be like, all right, you've asked enough questions, time to move on. And it's like talking to me, and it's like, what? And that's a wisdom lesson. It's like, okay, time to move on with your life and not just be with this book. And anyone who's used it probably has had the same experience. It's just hilarious. The thing about this book and the story I told about not trusting is that if you don't have that level of trust, the book will tell you. For me at the time, I needed something kind of blunt, and literal to say, time to put the book down. I was in my 20s and I didn't necessarily trust my intuition, and I was like, why am I getting this answer? Like you said, or more confusion. The book knows, like, all right, you need more information. We'll give you a deeper meaning. Or the book knows you've just done this too much and you're not open, and it's not like mean-spirited. It's kind of got a sense of humor.
I think that all the messages are coming at you in other ways as well.
Yeah.
But if you're not seeing them, then here it is in the I Ching.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting, as I've evolved, I don't use it very often, although it would be an interesting book just to read for fun or throw fun questions. But yeah, you and I have talked in many episodes about intuition and signs coming from all kinds of places. And so, in a sense, life can be an oracle. Everything can show us something.
I think probably life is an oracle. We just don't know how to interpret it.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that would be a really interesting experience to kind of watch you I Ching something in the future. So maybe we'll plan on that.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So that's it for today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you again, Michelle, and I hope the listeners have enjoyed the conversation.
Pleasure to be here as well, Linda.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.